The 1980s promised visions of tomorrow, laser battles, dystopian nightmares, and alien encounters. But some films went too far, shocking censors, enraging governments, and vanishing from theaters. What happens when science fiction isn't just entertainment, but a threat to order, morality, and control? Tonight we dive into the Forbidden Vaults, 15 sci-fi movies banned in the 80s, now resurfacing in their uncut glory. Number 15, Hardware, 1990, but banned in the late 80s releases. Though technically released at the dawn of the 1990s, Hardware was an underground project that lived in the shadows of late 80s development. Its reputation, a low-budget post-apocalyptic shocker, dismissed by critics but worshipped by cyberpunk fans. The story follows a scavenger who unknowingly brings home parts of a self-repairing military droid. In a cramped apartment, the machine rebuilds itself into a relentless killing force. The danger wasn't just the gore, though its blend of industrial violence and claustrophobic terror was enough to make British censors sweat. The bigger issue, the film echoed real-world military fears. Some whispered it was inspired by Pentagon robotics research. Others claimed it symbolized government control, crushing ordinary citizens. Censorship boards in the UK and parts of Europe hacked away at scenes of mechanical mutilation and menace. At one point, the film teetered on the edge of an outright ban, its VHS circulation heavily restricted. Meanwhile, in the US, it was slapped with an X rating before finally being trimmed for theatrical release. Behind the scenes, director Richard Stanley battled distributors who wanted a safer, mainstream film. Instead, he doubled down on surreal brutality, even sneaking in cameos from Iggy Pop and Lemmy Kilmister to cement its outsider status. The result was chaos. Critics tore it apart. Audiences walked out, but a subculture embraced it as cyberpunk prophecy. Today, Hardware is finally available in its full, uncut version. Its grinding soundtrack and grotesque visuals intact. Watching it now feels like stepping back into a nightmare of the 1980s, one where technology was already turning against us. It's a reminder that censorship couldn't kill cyberpunk's warning. The future would be brutal, metallic, and unstoppable. It's on number 14, The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1980s banned re-release cuts. Though originally released in 1976, The Man Who Fell to Earth faced a second life of censorship in the 1980s, when networks and distributors tried to cash in on David Bowie's cult following. This surreal tale of an alien trying to save his drought-stricken planet had already been controversial for its explicit nudity and unflinching critique of consumerism. But the 1980s climate of Reagan-era conservatism gave it new enemies. When reissued, it was brutally cut for TV and international releases. Entire sequences, Bowie's fragile alien body exposed in medical labs, intimate encounters that underscored his isolation, and the bleak finale of addiction and corporate betrayal were slashed away. For some countries like Chile and Singapore, the movie was outright banned, seen as indecent and politically subversive. What was left often resembled a hollow shell of Nicholas Roeg's original vision. The controversy stemmed not only from immoral content, but also from its depiction of corporate greed as a force that literally destroys an alien savior. In an era when governments championed privatization and profit, the metaphor cut too close to the bone. Rumors spread that Bowie's personal drug-fueled fragility blurred with his role, adding to the film's dangerous reputation. Audiences who saw the butchered versions were confused. Critics dismissed it as incoherent, but underground cinephiles sought out uncut reels, trading them like contraband. By the late 80s, it was whispered about in film clubs as a forbidden masterpiece. Today, the restored version reveals a haunting, slow-burning science fiction tragedy. It's no longer just Bowie's oddest performance. It's a time capsule of paranoia, censorship, and the fear of seeing ourselves in an alien mirror. Its resurrection proves that no matter how much studios tried to sanitize the vision, truth always finds a way back. Number 13. Altered States, 1980. When Ken Russell directed Altered States, critics expected flamboyance, but no one was ready for the chaos. The film followed Dr. Edward Jessup, a Harvard scientist experimenting with sensory deprivation and hallucinogens. His obsession drives him to regress into primitive, pre-human states. The result? A kaleidoscope of imagery, writhing bodies, religious hallucinations, and violent transformations that shocked audiences. Its controversy hit immediately. American censors attacked the hallucinatory orgies and grotesque evolutionary sequences, trimming frames of skin and violence. But abroad, especially in conservative regions, entire reels were refused. Ireland banned it for its psychedelics. Some South American countries condemned it as blasphemy. Rumors even spread that it secretly endorsed psychedelic drug use during the Reagan War on Drugs. Behind the scenes, production was a battlefield. Author Paddy Chayefsky, whose novel inspired the film, hated Russell's over-the-top style and demanded his name removed from the script. Actors were pushed to physical extremes, with William Hurt enduring intense contortions inside sensory tanks. The clash of vision and execution produced chaos that mirrored the story itself. A man devolving under the weight of obsession. For audiences, the film was either a revelation or a nightmare. Critics were split. Some hailed it as visionary, others dismissed it as incoherent madness. But the bans and edits only fueled its legend. The full uncut version, once relegated to rare art house screenings, eventually re-emerged in the DVD era, restoring Russell's psychotropic horrors. Today, Altered States feels like a forbidden transmission from the 1980s, a warning about the price of knowledge, censorship, and the fragile boundary between science and madness. Watching it uncut is like diving headfirst into the abyss, where every hallucination carries the weight of cultural fear. Number 12. Liquid Sky, 1982. When Liquid Sky premiered in 1982, it was hailed as one of the strangest, most daring visions of New York's underground. A low-budget, neon-drenched sci-fi about aliens harvesting endorphins from humans during orgasm. It became an instant cult sensation, but mainstream audiences and censors were horrified. They saw not art, but danger, a dangerous fusion of drugs and alien terror. The film's premise alone sparked bans. A microscopic UFO hovers over a Manhattan rooftop, drawn to the heroin-fueled nightlife of struggling models and musicians. Every encounter ends in death as the alien vaporizes its prey. It was surreal, violent, and unapologetically queer in its aesthetic, a radical departure from safe Hollywood sci-fi. Censors in Canada, Australia, and parts of Europe banned or heavily restricted it, citing its immoral mix of drugs and psychedelic violence. Behind the scenes, director Slava Zuckerman leaned into chaos. The costumes, fluorescent punk couture, were handmade on shoestring budgets. The electronic score, created on primitive synthesizers, pulsed like the heartbeat of the city. But critics split sharply. Some hailed it as avant-garde genius, others dismissed it as unwatchable filth. The censorship only amplified its mystique. VHS bootlegs circulated in queer clubs and art schools, where it was whispered about as a forbidden classic. By the late 80s, it had essentially vanished from theaters, surviving only in underground screenings. Now restored and uncut, Liquid Sky feels like a time capsule of 1980s paranoia, an alien invasion story fused with the AIDS epidemic, urban decay, and the fear of pleasure itself. Watching it today is like staring into a kaleidoscope of forbidden beauty. Censors tried to erase it, but its message remains. Desire itself can be lethal. Number 11. Xtro, 1982. In 1982, Xtro emerged from Britain with a reputation so vile that tabloids branded it the most disgusting sci-fi film ever made. The story follows a man abducted by aliens who returns to Earth, pregnant. His grotesque rebirth and the parasitic horrors that follow shocked audiences, pushing boundaries even horror veterans weren't prepared for. Censorship boards went into overdrive. The British Board of Film Classification cut entire sequences, including the infamous birth scene, where an alien bursts from a woman in a shower of blood. In the US, it was slapped with restrictive ratings and limited releases, while countries like Norway and Singapore banned it outright. The imagery, half sci-fi, half nightmare, was deemed indecent and too psychologically disturbing for audiences. Production was equally fraught. With a shoestring budget and inexperienced crew, the film relied on practical effects that were as crude as they were shocking. Critics savaged it as trash cinema, with Roger Ebert calling it a catastrophe. Yet, despite, or because of, this reputation, it became a cult object. Underground fans treasured the uncut versions smuggled on VHS, where the film's unhinged imagination could run free. The legacy of Xtro is one of survival through controversy. Though critics buried it, audiences resurrected it as an emblem of forbidden sci-fi horror. Today, the uncut version plays like a fever dream, a collision of alien dread, grotesque imagery, and 1980s nihilism. Censors tried to erase it, but in doing so, they made it unforgettable. Xtro remains proof that the most reviled films often carry the most lasting power. Number 10, The Hidden, 1987. Unlike many of its banned contemporaries, The Hidden was slick, fast, and thrilling. A sci-fi crime mashup that seemed primed for mainstream success. The story follows an alien parasite that leaps from body to body, turning ordinary citizens into deranged killers. It's a high-octane mix of car chases, gunfights, and body horror that critics later compared to The Terminator. But in the late 1980s, it terrified censors. The violence was relentless. Innocent bystanders mowed down, grotesque transformations, and a nihilistic tone that suggested evil could hide in anyone. Several European countries, including Finland and West Germany, slapped it with bans or severe edits, fearing it glorified mindless violence. The Yusuke circulated it only in cut form, trimming some of its most shocking sequences. Behind the camera, director Jack Shoulder battled studio interference. Executives feared the film's bleakness would tank box office prospects. At one point, the finale, where the alien erupts from a dying host, was nearly cut entirely. Actor Kyle MacLachlan, fresh from Blue Velvet, gave the film an eerie intensity, but even his rising star couldn't shield it from censorship. Despite the obstacles, the film gained traction on video rental shelves, where word of mouth turned it into a sleeper hit. Fans whispered about the uncut version, a more brutal and disturbing cut that circulated overseas. For years, these versions were rare treasures, passed between collectors. Today, The Hidden stands tall as one of the decade's sharpest sci-fi thrillers, finally restored, uncut, and as brutal as intended. It reminds us that beneath the neon of the 80s lurked a darker truth. Sometimes, the monster really is inside us. Censors tried to dim its fire, but now it burns brighter than ever. Number 9, Tetsuo, The Iron Man, 1989. When Tetsuo, The Iron Man premiered in Japan, it stunned audiences into silence. Shot in black and white on a minuscule budget, Shinya Tsukamoto's film wasn't just sci-fi. It was a nightmare of flesh and metal colliding. The story follows an ordinary man infected by a strange curse, his body gradually mutating into twisted machinery. It's grotesque, surreal, and disturbingly hypnotic. But censors worldwide didn't see art, they saw threat. Its body horror transformations, blending imagery with industrial violence, pushed boundaries far beyond what Western distributors dared touch. Britain's censorship boards balked, banning it outright from theatrical release. In the US, it played only at underground midnight screenings, often uncut but far from mainstream theaters. Countries like Malaysia and Singapore deemed it obscene, refusing entry entirely. Behind the scenes, Tsukamoto worked with guerrilla filmmaking intensity, shooting in cramped apartments, creating stop-motion sequences that pulse like hallucinations. Crew members endured exhaustion, sometimes collapsing under the harsh strobe lighting, yet the chaos on set birthed a cinematic mutation, unlike anything before. Critics called it cyberpunk on crack. Some walked out in disgust, but others hailed it as a masterpiece of industrial horror. The aftermath was telling. Bootleg VHS copies spread globally, turning the film into whispered legend. Fans who discovered it felt they'd unearthed forbidden cinema, a film too dangerous for daylight. Today, uncut versions are widely available, and its influence is undeniable. Echoes of Tetsuo can be seen in everything from The Matrix to Akira. Watching it now is like plugging directly into 1980s paranoia, fear of technology, loss of humanity, and the seduction of machines. Censors tried to silence it, but instead, they helped turn it into an immortal cult artifact. Number 8. Scanners, 1981. David Cronenberg's Scanners exploded onto screens in 1981 with a moment no one could forget. A man's head exploding in a shower of gore. The film follows telepaths, scanners, whose psychic abilities turn into weapons of mass destruction. Its premise was terrifying, mind control as corporate warfare. But it was that infamous scene that turned censors against it. In Britain, the BBFC cut deeply, trimming gore from the exploding head and violent psychic battles. In several European countries, including Sweden and Germany, bans were issued, citing the film's brutality of the mind. Even in the US, distributors worried. Some theaters refused to show it uncut, fearful of backlash during the conservative climate of the early 80s. Behind the scenes, the chaos was just as real. Cronenberg raced to finish the script while shooting, often writing scenes the night before filming. Special effects crews worked frantically to perfect the exploding head sequence, eventually using a shotgun blast to achieve the gruesome effect. The intensity pushed the film to its breaking point, but the result was unforgettable. Audiences were divided. Some fainted, others cheered, and critics branded it dangerous exploitation. But word of mouth turned it into a cult phenomenon. VHS versions circulated uncut, treasured by fans who wanted the raw impact censors tried to suppress. Today, Scanners is remembered not just for shock value, but for its eerie vision of corporations weaponizing the human mind. Watching the uncut version is like reclaiming a piece of 1980s cinematic rebellion. It's a reminder that censorship only amplified its legend, and that sometimes a single exploding head can change movie history. Number 7. The Thing, 1982. When John Carpenter's The Thing arrived in 1982, it was poised to be a sci-fi horror classic. Instead, it was met with disgust, bans, and backlash that nearly destroyed Carpenter's career. The story, a group of Antarctic researchers battling a shape-shifting alien that mimics its victims, was pure paranoia brought to life. But it was the film's effects that pushed it into dangerous territory. Censors recoiled at Rob Bottin's groundbreaking practical effects. Bodies splitting open, heads sprouting spider legs, organs morphing into monstrous hybrids. Britain cut heavily for video release. Finland banned it outright. And Australia imposed restrictions. Even in the US, critics labeled it pornography of violence, accusing Carpenter of creating a film too vile for mainstream audiences. The irony? It premiered just 2 weeks after E.T., whose heartwarming alien only made The Thing look darker. Behind the camera, production nearly broke the crew. Bottin worked himself into exhaustion, hospitalized from overwork, while Stan Winston stepped in for backup. Carpenter fought studio interference, as executives panicked at early test screenings where audiences stormed out in horror. The result was commercial disaster. Critics panned it, audiences avoided it, and Universal quietly buried it. But censorship and failure couldn't kill its legend. Over time, fans resurrected The Thing, passing uncut versions through VHS circles. By the late 80s, it had become a cult phenomenon, its once condemned effects now hailed as revolutionary. Today, the uncut film is considered one of the greatest sci-fi horrors ever made. Watching it uncut is like reliving a nightmare the world wasn't ready for. Censors tried to erase its vision of paranoia, but instead, they made it timeless. The alien may have been destroyed, but the fear it left behind still crawls through cinema history. Number 6. Videodrome, 1983. When David Cronenberg unleashed Videodrome in 1983, he wasn't making a simple sci-fi thriller. He was predicting the future of media itself. The story follows Max Wren, a sleazy TV executive who discovers a broadcast signal that doesn't just entertain, it infects. Soon, hallucinations, body mutations, and a descent into madness take hold. It was a vision too radical for censors to stomach. The film's grotesque imagery, guns merging with human hands, stomachs opening like VCR slots, flesh and technology fusing, was unlike anything seen before. Britain's BBFC attacked it mercilessly, cutting entire sequences and eventually banning it during the infamous Video Nasties crackdown. In Germany, portions were censored. In the US, it barely scraped by with an R rating after brutal edits. Governments feared it glamorized violence and media corruption, whispering that its message encouraged rebellion against authority. Behind the scenes, chaos reigned. Cronenberg clashed with censors while juggling a rushed production schedule. James Woods and Debbie Harry pushed their performances to extremes, blurring the line between reality and hallucination. The special effects team, led by Rick Baker, worked miracles, creating organic horrors that felt disturbingly real. Early test screenings left audiences disturbed, with many storming out mid-film. At release, critics were polarized. Some hailed it as visionary, others called it obscene trash. But on VHS, especially in its uncut form, it found an audience: college students, cinephiles, and rebels hungry for forbidden cinema. The censorship only amplified its mystique, turning it into an underground gospel about the dangers of television and control. Today, the uncut Videodrome feels eerily prophetic. In an era of endless screens and digital addiction, its warning is more relevant than ever. Censors tried to erase it, but instead, they ensured it would live on as one of sci-fi's most dangerous prophecies. Long live the new flesh. Number 5. Brazil, 1985. Terry Gilliam's Brazil wasn't banned for gore or nudity. It was banned for daring to mock bureaucracy, totalitarianism, and the very systems that govern society. This dystopian satire follows a low-level clerk trapped in a nightmare of paperwork, surveillance, and malfunctioning machines. It was absurd, darkly funny, and terrifyingly accurate. Too accurate, some governments thought. The controversy began with Universal Pictures itself. The studio hated Gilliam's bleak ending, where the hero escapes only through insanity. Executives demanded a "love conquers all" cut, trimming 30 minutes and changing the tone entirely. Gilliam fought back publicly, even taking out full-page ads asking why. Audiences were being denied his version. Meanwhile, abroad, the film faced outright bans. In heavily censored markets like South Korea and Chile, its satirical attacks on government control were deemed too subversive. Production was equally chaotic. Gilliam clashed constantly with Universal, sneaking uncut versions to critics and academics. The film was nearly buried until the Los Angeles Film Critics Association awarded his uncut cut Best Picture before it was even released. That forced Universal's hand, but only after massive edits. Many countries received the bowdlerized version, stripped of its darkest satire. Audiences who saw the full cut were stunned. Those who only saw the censored version often found it confusing, even boring. The divide created one of the decade's most infamous censorship battles. Today, the uncut Brazil is hailed as a masterpiece of dystopian cinema, influencing everything from The Matrix to Black Mirror. Watching it in full reveals the chilling truth Gilliam fought for. Censorship itself was the villain all along. In trying to control his vision, the studio proved his point. Number 4. Akira, 1988. When Akira exploded onto screens in 1988, it was a revolution. Katsuhiro Otomo's anime epic depicted a cyberpunk Tokyo of biker gangs, psychic children, and government conspiracies. But its violence, graphic dismemberments, grotesque mutations, and apocalyptic destruction terrified censors worldwide. They weren't ready for anime that rivaled live action in intensity. The premise follows Tetsuo, a troubled teen whose psychic powers spiral out of control, threatening to annihilate the city. The imagery was stunning: neon-soaked streets, grotesque body horror transformations, and a finale of pure chaos. Japan embraced it, but elsewhere, censors panicked. In Germany, scenes of gore were trimmed. In parts of Southeast Asia, it was outright banned, branded dangerous for youth. Even in the US, early VHS releases were cut, softening the violence and muting the political edge. Behind the scenes, the scale of the project was staggering. Thousands of animation cells, an original soundtrack recorded before animation was finished, and unprecedented budgets gave Akira a visual power unlike any anime before. But this ambition only made censors more fearful. It wasn't just violent, it was disturbingly real. Audiences split sharply. Some critics dismissed it as grotesque, while fans hailed it as the future of animation. Bootleg copies of the uncut film circulated through college campuses and fan clubs, building an underground fandom that grew into legend. By the late 80s, whispers about the real Akira drove demand for uncut screenings. Today, Akira is considered one of the greatest animated films ever made. Its uncut form has finally reached global audiences, restoring its violence, political commentary, and unflinching vision of apocalypse. It stands as proof that censorship couldn't contain the future. Watching Akira Uncut isn't just cinema, it's prophecy. A neon-lit scream against control that still echoes across decades. Number 3, Robocop, 1987. When Paul Verhoeven's Robocop hit theaters in 1987, it looked like a pulpy action film about a cyborg cop. But beneath the surface, it was a savage satire on corporate greed, privatized policing, and media violence. The problem? Censors didn't see satire, they saw excess. The original cut was brutally violent. Criminals gunning down Murphy in excruciating detail. A corporate executive shredded by an out-of-control robot. Scenes of gore that lingered long after audiences could look away. The MPAA slapped it with an X rating multiple times, forcing Verhoeven to trim over 20 seconds of carnage just to secure an R. Abroad, it was worse. The UK and Australia censored it heavily, while others whispered it glorified fascism. Behind the scenes, Verhoeven pushed the crew mercilessly. Practical effects were groundbreaking but dangerous. Squibs exploding, mechanical props malfunctioning, even minor injuries on set. Producers feared the tone. Was it satire or sadism? The answer, of course, was both. At release, critics were divided. Some called it disgusting. Others praised its intelligence hidden beneath the blood. Audiences, though, couldn't get enough. Yet, fans who saw the theatrical version didn't get the full impact. Only bootleg tapes of the uncut director's cut circulated, fueling rumors of a far darker film. Today, that uncut Robocop is widely available, and its message has aged like prophecy. It's not just a violent sci-fi film, it's a grim forecast of corporate power. The censors tried to water it down, but all they did was confirm its warning. The system silences what it fears most. Number 1. Blade Runner, 1982. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner is now revered as one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made. But in 1982, it was considered dangerous, too slow, too bleak, and too radical in its vision of the future. Studio executives forced Scott to add narration and a happy ending. Meanwhile, abroad, censors hacked into its darker moments, trimming violence and softening its tone. The premise, Deckard hunting rogue replicants in a neon-soaked dystopia, was already subversive, but its imagery of corporate towers, environmental collapse, and humans treated like machines made governments uneasy. The UK and Germany censored moments of violence. Japan restricted screenings, claiming it promoted nihilism. The true director's cut remained buried, whispered about in fan circles. Behind the scenes, production was chaotic. Actors clashed with Scott, who pushed for perfection through endless takes. Studio interference grew so severe that Scott nearly lost creative control. When the film flopped at the box office, executives considered it proof they were right. Yet, fans who glimpsed test screenings of uncut versions knew there was something more. The aftermath turned it into legend. VHS bootlegs of the work print circulated, fueling rumors of hidden meanings and a darker, truer ending. By the 1990s, the director's cut restored Scott's vision, and decades later, the final cut solidified it as masterpiece. Watching Blade Runner Uncut today is like stepping into the future we fear we've already inherited. The censors tried to make it safe, but they couldn't erase its truth. The line between human and machine is thinner than we want to believe. These 15 films remind us of a chilling truth. Censorship doesn't kill ideas. It only buries them, waiting for discovery. From corporate satire to cyberpunk prophecy, their uncut versions reveal not just what we were forbidden to see, but what authorities feared we might learn. Which banned sci-fi movie haunts you most? Like, subscribe, and share your hidden favorite.